Welcome back, everybody, to the Fantasy Hockey Hacks podcast, a member of the Hockey Podcast Network and the official podcast of Left Wing Lock. I'm Devin Davidson, your host. With me, as always, Bruce Gunther, John Enns, Tyler Holman, and with us, a special guest tonight, Mike McLaughlin from Left Wing Lock. Welcome back, guys.
Hello.
Yeah, good to be here. Nice to be back.
Mike, thanks for joining us for a special episode. It's been kind of a wonky week, eh?
I'll say.
Yeah.
Just given that everything's been postponed or shut down for a few days here, we decided that, and with the Christmas holiday, it made sense to just pre-record an early episode here and do something a little bit different. So we're getting away from our usual format for this week. Episode 40. I should have mentioned that too. Sorry, guys. This is episode number 40 of the Fantasy Hockey Hacks podcast. So, and with that, we're doing a framework for evaluating players. And we're happy to have Mike here to help us with that. So that's going to be one of our segments. And then also we're introducing a new segment that Mike is going to be covering in future episodes. So we'll give you a bit of a teaser for that. And we're not going to discuss waiver wire picks because, like we just said, the league is essentially shut down until the 27th. So we will have some waiver wire picks available in the show notes or on the blog post for the website. Keep an eye open for that. But otherwise, we're going to run with a different format here today. So, yeah, I guess that's the spiel, guys. What else can I tell you? I wanted to mention that the Hockey Podcast Network is actually running currently a contest where you can win 2 tickets to any NHL home game of your choosing. I've included the link in the show notes. I did retweet it from our Twitter account as well. So if you're interested in entering that contest, be sure to check out our profile on Twitter, and all the information will be there. You can also check out the Hockey Podcast Network on Twitter. I think it's the HockeyPodNet is their handle, so check that out. And with that, I'll quit rambling so we can get into the good stuff here. So segment 1, first segment of the night here, framework for evaluating players. Essentially what we've come up with, it's called L.A.P.S. It's an acronym. L.A.P.S. stands for line mates and deployment, analytics and luck. Analytics and luck. Just roll the rest of this, production and strength of schedule and matchups. So we'll cover all of that right now, but we'll get into it. Starting off with line mates and deployment. So I don't know, guys. You tell me. One of the first things I do when I look at waiver wire pickups or trades is their line mates. Who are they playing with? Are they getting time on the power play? And how is that line producing? But I mean, Mike, how do you when you're looking at line mates, what's important for you?
Yeah, for line mates, for me, one of the things I like to look at is how that line is being deployed.
Yeah,
and I think this will be especially important coming up for anybody who owns Eriksson Ek for the Minnesota Wild.
Bruce.
Is that Bruce?
That's Bruce. Yep.
3 leagues.
So he left the game the other night and apparently was seen wearing a sling after the game, and so that injury is going to be long term. And the reason I bring him up in particular is because he plays a very specific kind of minutes for the Wild. And those minutes are very difficult. He plays very low offensive zone starts. So most of his starts, shifts start in the defensive zone. And he faces some of the highest quality of competition from opposing players. And so those are like prime minutes in the NHL. Like if coaches dream about having players who can play these kind of minutes. These are like Yanni Gourde Stanley Cup for Tampa Bay kind of minutes. And Minnesota doesn't have those anymore. They're missing their center, right? Eriksson Ek, he's gone. We don't know how long, but it's going to be significant.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the kind of detail I would be concerned about with when I'm looking at lines now. Because what is going to happen in Minnesota? Are they going to change up the top line with Hartman to adjust for that? Are they going to bring up Nico Sturm from the fourth line and let him play those defensive minutes? He plays similar minutes to Eriksson Ek against weaker competition. And so for me, that just kind of, to bring this back to a more general point, that's the kind of stuff I look at. Who is a guy playing with? What kind of minutes are they? Are they tough? Does he face top players? Is he playing sheltered minutes? Somebody like Keith Yandel in Philadelphia. He plays some of the easiest minutes in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And he needs to. If you ever see his deployment change, run. Because he has a history of playing very poorly when he has to play defensive minutes.
Okay.
And so that's an important topic for me is looking at how the players are deployed.
Do you put much stock in, or do you look at possession metrics? Like, are you looking at shot attempts for, unblocked shot attempt percentage, goals for percentage? Are those things you'll dig into when you're evaluating players?
Definitely. If you've got a guy, for instance, going back to Eriksson Ek, he plays those tough minutes, but what's really unique about him and guys like Yanni Gourde as well, is that even though they play those really tough minutes, they drive play. Like, their possession stats are over 50%, which is remarkable.
Yeah.
And that's important to me because the more a team has the puck when that particular player is on the ice, that leads to things like more shots, more assists, more goals, more points.
Scoring chances, yep.
Yeah.
We should mention, so on the Left Wing Lock site, you've got a player usage chart available. I've put the link in the show notes there. So some of these things you're talking about, offensive zone starts, quality competition, they're all shown visually in those charts, correct?
Yeah, that's right. And those charts are just kind of a nice, visual replacement for looking at, 3 or 4 data tables instead.
Yeah. No, they're very handy. And we should mention as well, not that Bruce or John can use it, but the Left Wing Lock app, which is fantastic. It does have some options to look at line production over a certain period of time. So whether it's the previous game, 3 games, 10 games, you can look really quickly, right, Mike, and just see which lines have scored the most goals over that stretch of time.
That's right.
So another handy thing to take a look at. Tyler, I know you scour the waiver wire probably as much as I do, if not more. Is there anything else you look at when it comes to line mates and deployment?
Not a ton. I'll sort through the last 7 days. If we're on a Saturday or Sunday, I'll kind of sort through their last 7 days or 15-day stats. And I don't know, if I'm playing you, I'll pick up a couple of them that have been performing the last couple of days.
Isn't that the truth?
But beyond that, I don't do too much more than that. But
okay,
it's worked out so far this year.
It's been
Other
just
than
fine.
last week.
Yeah, you're doing
and
okay.
this week. Yikes.
Well, you're in the same boat as I think 99% of the population right now. So, Bruce, anything from your perspective when it comes to line mates and deployment?
I'm kind of like Tyler. I go back a week or two in the stats, and then I'll take a look at the stats, and then once I identify a few players, I'll go take a look and see which lines they're on, or if they're on power play time, or things along that line, ice time too.
Yeah,
and take that all into account as well.
Yeah, and just to Mike's point, like it's the deployment is important, right? Because if a guy plays 22 minutes, but it's all in the defensive zone, I mean that's not ideal, right? I mean, unless he's continuing to produce offensively at the same time, but.
Yeah.
Or if your league counts shifts.
Man. I knew it was coming.
There it is.
Yep.
Started early.
Yeah, get your shots in. Man, oh man.
Right.
Okay, John, anything from your perspective you want to talk about in terms of line mates and deployment?
Not a whole lot to add. Just I like to when I go through the waiver picks, I like to kind of look to see the whole situation on the line mates, to see whose teammates are injured, whose aren't, and kind of like to go from there. As Tyler said, look at the stats there for the last, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 games, see how that is. But just for injuries and stuff, and power play time for sure is a huge thing as well. So
that kind of reminded me of a question I had for you, Mike. how long is relevant in your mind? Like, is 7-day stats, is that relevant, or can you just attribute that maybe to, could it be luck, right? Could the guy be on a heater and he might collapse the next game? Like, so how much do you look at that? Do you look at 30 days? Is that a relevant sample size? Like, what's your take on that?
Oh, that's a good question that I don't know that I have a good answer for.
Okay.
I mean, just if you're asking me what do I do personally, I will tend to look at around the 14-day range.
Sure.
Is kind of the smallest I like to go.
Okay.
On sample sizes. But really, some of these guys can go on streaks that last months.
Yeah.
You've got Alex Ovechkin right now, who's
Trash.
playing out of his mind, right? Like just his shooting percentage is way up there, his assist rate is way up there, and he's not slowing down. It's already Christmas time.
Yeah.
You would have expected this to slow down by now, and it hasn't. And there are a few other players like him who are just playing out of their minds, and so you can, and I'm speaking about myself here. You can look pretty dumb by calling that a streak's going to end soon. I've done it already this season, and Ovechkin continues to mock me.
I was like, I don't like cheering for Ovechkin though.
It's
not
tough.
gonna happen, but yeah.
I'm just riding that wave. I've got Ovi in one league, and it's been a very pleasant surprise.
Yeah, and really, when it comes to somebody like Ovechkin or Draisaitl, like these guys, when they slow down, they're still better than almost the entire league, right?
Yeah. No, John's giving the thumbs down on Draisaitl, of course.
I have to.
Oh man, I'll never understand that.
Screw you, John.
You're on the list. You're on the list.
Absolutely.
Oh man. Well, hey, you know what? That reminds me, John. We missed John's list earlier this week on our episode that just dropped on Monday. So if you have some time throughout the episode tonight, if you want to throw down a John's list at some point towards the end, not to put you on the spot,
okay.
but if someone comes to mind,
I have the player pick. I have the player picked out already. But...
Okay, well maybe let's get
Who
to it
is
at the end of the show then.
Oh,
Okay.
whatever.
Or you want to do it right now, Tyler?
Well, I want to be upset about it right now. I don't
Okay,
wanna
well,
wait.
John, we'll take a break here. We're gonna sidetrack. Who's your guy? Who's on the list?
Drew Doughty's my guy today for this week's list.
Fuck him. I hate him. I'm with you.
Well then,
That might be the first time you two have ever agreed on that list. That's hilarious.
right?
It'll never happen again. I promise.
Reason being, definitely not hockey related. He just has that stupid beard that he's always had and that ugly dumb grin that he has with like 4 teeth in it. Like, man.
Okay, that's good. I got nothing to add to that, John. That's great.
I don't know. I was trying to think of one. I was like, okay, I'm going with Doughty just because I can't stand watching him smile or anything like that. Like, I'd be happy if he was miserable all the time.
Well, you're not going to have to watch him in the Olympics this year, it sounds like, so you can count yourself lucky, I guess.
He wouldn't have made the team anyways.
I don't even know what to respond to that. So
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Okay, guys, well, let's get back on to our framework here for evaluating players. We're going to move on to analytics and luck. Mike, this is largely going to be your section. We're just going to try and chip in wherever we may have a tidbit of knowledge, but when assessing a player's overall value, it's just best to do so objectively, right? And you want to look at the underlying numbers and try to see what they're telling you. So we're going to have a little bit of feedback, but Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you. You've got lots of stuff here, and we've broken it down kind of into skaters, goalies, and teams, right? So we've kind of got some analytics for each one. We'll start with skaters here, and the first metric is individual shooting percentage. So maybe if you want to break it down for our listeners, what we're talking about and why that's important.
Okay, if we're just talking about individual shooting percentage here, one of the things that I look for, and I mentioned this with Ovechkin a few minutes ago, is I look for guys who are playing, beyond their career or even 3-year averages. Somebody who's playing at an abnormal rate, essentially. And so for individual shooting percentage, I think I had a little note here I wanted to share. Over the past, 5 or 6 years, there have been just 4 instances of a player who finishes the season at 20% or higher for his individual shooting percentage. And to me, that's important. That means, roughly speaking, you'll get one guy a year who finishes 20% or higher. And I'm not talking, you might get an occasional fourth line guy who does it on 20 shots or something. I'm talking about like fantasy relevant players here. So maybe once a season is what you expect to happen. And so I decided to check the numbers for this season so far, now that we've hit the Christmas break. And I counted, I have 4 guys right now. I have 13 guys right now who are shooting at 20% or higher in this current season. And so that's important to me. So if you know that typically it happens just once per season.
Yeah.
And right now we're looking at 13 of these guys with high shooting percentages. The odds tell you, and again, I can't pinpoint which players this will be, individually, but as a whole, that group right now that's shooting over 20%, you have very good odds that they're all going to come down pretty significantly over the next, 4 months.
Yeah.
And that should be the principle that guides you the rest of the season. If I'm holding a guy who's shooting over 20% right now, I'm going to think twice about, how he's going to look come April.
So are there a couple notable names you'd want to throw out there?
The one that really, really jumps out at me, and he'll probably make me look dumb, is McCarr for Colorado.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So he's over 20%. And now I said there's 13 of these guys, but what makes McCarr interesting is that he's a defenseman.
Yeah.
And so it made me go, and I looked a little bit deeper. I wanted to know, have there been defensemen who have shot with this, this success rate in the past? And the answer is overwhelmingly no. The highest guy I could find in the last 20 or so years was Mike Green for the Washington Capitals.
Yep.
He shot with 12.8%.
That was the season he put up, was it 80 points or something like that? It was...
Yeah, he went nuts that year. I think, I don't remember, it was 2008, 2009 for the Capitals.
Okay, yeah.
And then the next closest one I could find was Victor Hedman at 9.6%. And he did that about 3 or 4 years ago for Tampa Bay.
Interesting.
And so that's the guy right now that jumps out at me, is that, Colorado blue line, you've got a defenseman shooting over 20%. We already know that forwards rarely, once per season, finish over 20%. And the fact that this is a defenseman should be red flags, just blaring in your face right now.
So, but I mean, valid point. Are you going to trade McCarr though? Like, just get. I mean,
yeah, that's where these things become a little bit tough too, right? You talk about a guy like Ovechkin or McCarr, their stats are kind of abnormal, right? They're abnormally high, and
yeah.
They're going to come back down eventually. But then the real question becomes, can you get real value in return for these guys?
It's tough, right? It's tough to get.
Yeah, like who do you get in return from McCarr? That would make you feel comfortable. It would have to be a high-scoring defenseman. So you're looking for a power play one guy with no ambiguities. It's got to be somebody like Roman Josi for the Predators, maybe, and then something else also. It couldn't just be a one-for-one there.
Yeah. Yeah, and
I'll give
then
you
of
Noah
course,
Dobson.
Noah Dobson, so you said.
I'll trade you a bunch of stuff for him. Whatever you want. You tell me.
Whatever you want.
Yeah.
Nobody's making any trades here.
Oh man.
Not with you, Tyler. Not with you.
You sound like the Oilers, Tyler.
know.
We'll give you whatever you want for Jacob Chikrin. We'll give you half the roster. Just let's get him back.
Take it.
Yeah.
Take it and go. Take it and go.
Okay. That's good stuff there. Let's move on to even strength shooting percentage. 5-on-5 shooting percentage, right, Mike?
Yeah, that's right. So, all right. So for that, I'm looking at the team's shooting percentage while this particular player is on the ice. Okay. And normally a typical value for a player, any player across the league, is going to be about 8.5%. So
Yeah.
just to make sure everyone's clear on that, who's listening, that means when your particular player is on the ice, his team is going to score on 8.5% of the shots that they take at even strength. And that's a pretty good average across the league. Like even some of the very good players see numbers around that range. And it's largely because they share the ice with, 4 other players.
Right.
And so I did a similar thing here. I tried to look for some extreme cases, both over the past 20 years or so, and then what's happening right now in this season. And again, the idea here is we want to find players who have these even strength shooting percentage values that are just wildly different from the norm.
Right. Okay.
And so, over the past 10, 12 years, there have been 14 instances where I found a team even strength shooting percentage that was above 12%. Okay, so again, what I'm doing here is I'm basically trying to find the level of stat, the level of stat for this category where it's happening about once per season.
Right. Yep.
And so on average, about once per season, you're going to see a guy finish the season at 12% or higher.
But not often.
And interesting nugget, if you're a Vancouver Canucks fan, the highest ever recorded value is 13.8% by Henrik Sedin.
Interesting.
And so this season right now, remember, and we're expecting this to happen on average about once per season. Right now we have 29 players in the league who have a team even strength shooting percentage above 12%. And again, you can find these lists. You can find these kind of stats at NHL.com. They have a pretty sophisticated stats page now where you can dig real deep into it. We have some of these stats as well at leftwinglock.com. But whatever your source that you like to use, you can quickly find these 29 players. And these would be guys, again, I'd be taking a close look at them for how they're going to play in the second half. Because we know the league average for this stat is 8.5%, and these guys are over 12%. And since there's 29 of them, and we usually only get one of them per season, you can pretty safely assume that the whole crop of players are going to drop. And it's a long way down.
So again, are there a couple guys that you might want to mention to our listeners, someone keep an eye out because he's going to crash down to come back to reality, or someone you want to look as a sell high candidate?
I'm afraid to say his name. He has ruined me so far this year. It's Alex Ovechkin again. I don't have his even strength shooting percentage on hand, but I know it's high. It's very high.
It's 15.2%. No, wait, sorry, 15.5.
Yeah, that's outrageous.
Yeah, that's crazy, actually. Ugh.
I mean, you're talking about a number that's almost twice the league average, and it's probably at least 3 to 4 percentage points above where Ovechkin usually is anyway.
Wow. See if I can find that. Well, last year he finished at 11.6. The year previous, 9.3. And then 11, 10, 9. Like he's kind of been somewhere around 9, right? But
yeah, so he's a higher, he's an elite player, so his EVSH will be a little bit higher than the league average. But so if you're wondering what this leads to extra points at even strength, right? And usually it means you're getting too many assists.
Right. Yes, and his secondary assist percentage is high at 48%, or high for him, higher. So that's a valid point there. His points per 62, Mike, is way high. He's at 4.1 points per 60 right now, and he's typically around 2.9. So, yeah, he's just up all over the board.
It feels painful to me to like root against this guy because I like him, but also because I know he's so dangerous on the ice, and so to sit here and say, hey, wake up, Ovechkin owners, he's gonna crash. I feel like I'm just setting myself up for
failure,
abuse and hate mail, but
that's crazy.
It has to happen, right? Like he's gonna drop
for sure. Okay, well, we were just talking about it, points per 60. That's kind of the next metric we want to take a look at. So, I guess from my perspective, really, Mike, you correct me if I'm wrong, but it's basically just a way to level the playing field in terms of ice time, right? Because not everyone's playing the same amount of time on ice. Is that kind of what we're looking at?
Yeah, I'd say so. And I don't personally use points per 60 when I'm kind of analyzing fantasy hockey players, and there's kind of one reason I kind of avoid it. Okay. Points per 60, of course, is made up of goals and assists, right? And while the assists you can't control so much, the goal part you can, and that's driven by your shooting behavior. And so if your shot rate, your shots per 60, it has grown quite a bit, from one season to the next, that would drive your points per 60 to ramp up as well. And so even though the number would look kind of like an anomaly because it's higher than previous seasons, if it's being driven by higher shot rates, then it's actually it's an okay thing to happen.
Okay.
And so for me, I don't use it too much as kind of like a warning sign just for that reason.
Can be deceiving. Okay. That's good to know. This is one we hear a lot about is individual points percentage. Maybe talk about that one a bit and why it's important for listeners.
Yeah, so this one's really neat. I use this one a lot in the off season, and I use it in season as well. And so for individual points percentage, what we're talking about here is when a player is on the ice and his team scores a goal at even strength, we want to know how often is that player being rewarded with a point for that goal. Either they scored the goal or they got an assist for that goal.
Right. And
so in general, forwards come in at around 70% for their individual points percentage, their IPP. And defensemen come in at about half that, or, about 30%. And so those are your baselines here, 70% and 30%. Again, you're going to have some players who are elite who bump those numbers up. And so really for me, just looking at IPP, especially in the offseason, I'm looking for players who have values that are just huge anomalies from their career averages.
Yeah.
And you can use that to your advantage. I think it's a huge tool in the offseason is finding players who've had a massive dip. For me, the guy we found this summer that we kind of promoted in our draft kit was Matt Duchene for Nashville Predators.
Okay.
His IPP had been ridiculously low last season. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it was just really low. You looked at it, you were like, oh my gosh, what happened to this guy? I think it was something like 50%. And so we promoted him heavily, and he's rebounded really nicely this season mainly because his IPP, it was most likely going to return to normal, and it has.
Yeah. Yeah, he's had a good season, injuries and COVID aside, but he's been very good this year.
Yeah.
Okay. Secondary assist percentage. Why is that important for listeners? Why is it a metric we should be keeping an eye on?
Okay, so for secondary assists, I guess there may be a distinction here, and we can clear that up. I guess when you say secondary assist percentage, what do you use that? Like, what is your definition of that?
Yeah, basically what percentage of a player's assists are secondary in nature, so he was the first of two players to touch the puck prior to the goal scorer, versus a primary assist where that was typically the player that passed the puck to the goal scorer.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I personally use something called secondary assist rate.
Okay.
As opposed to secondary assist percentage. Those two will overlap most of the time. but I'll point out one time when they don't. So again, for secondary assist, changes from the norm is what you're looking for. And for secondary assist rates, they come in on the high end at about 1 secondary assist for every 60 minutes of play. The best players in the league, that's what you're going to see, is a value of about 1 for every 60 minutes. And I am seeing that happened about 10 times over the last 15 years or so. So more or less, you're looking at about once a season again.
Right.
When you're looking at once a season for somebody exceeding 1 secondary assist per 60 minutes. And currently, in this season right now, we have 11 players who are over that rate. And these, secondary assist rates, when they change from a player's career average, it's almost always driven by luck.
Right.
There's very little you can do to make your secondary assist rate go up. And so if you see a guy who has a secondary assist rate that's very, very high, you should be looking at a future where his point production drops.
Yeah, the one classic example everyone in Edmonton last year, Tyler was talking about, was Tyson Barrie. And the number I'm looking at for last year was roughly 68% secondary assists. So, and now this year, he hasn't done a whole lot, has he, Tyler?
No.
Sorry, I'm not trying, but it's a fact. Like, Barry's been not so great this year.
Is it because I have Barry on my team? Is that why?
It could be. It could
is
be.
This
Tyler.
why?
It's because you and I have Barry, Tyler. That's why it's like double jeopardy.
I see.
Nice.
Sorry, boys.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if anybody out there happens to be a Donskoy owner, so he's in Seattle this year, I guess, right? If you're a Donskoy owner, his secondary assist rate sits at 1.5 right now, which is just from a standpoint of values over the last 20 years, that's an outrageous number.
Yeah.
He's getting very lucky so far.
Where does Troy Terry fall on there? Is he anywhere on that list?
I know his IPP was high, Tyler, when I looked at his numbers.
Yeah.
He's also one of the guys who has an individual shooting percentage that's over 20%.
Yeah, it's insane. Not a lot of track record to go against either, but
it's 75%, Tyler, secondary assist percentage.
That's good, wow. Right?
That's not good. and actually last year it was at 23%. The year before it was 18, 33. So it's like it's sky high right now. That guy.
Yeah.
Points per 60.
He's gonna get worse.
He's at 3.4 right now. Previous years he's been at 1.7, 1.3, 1.7. So, but Mike, to your point earlier about shot volume, he's shots on goal per 60. He's at 8.4 right now, and in years previous he'd been at or below 6. As low as 3.4 in 2018, 2019. So, there's some
like a 30% hike there.
Yeah, there's some behavioral changes that are at least partially accounting for his increase in production. But, that secondary assist rate is pretty iffy.
So he's got high secondary assist rates, and he's got the shooting percentage over 20% as well.
Yeah.
Devin, you want to make a trade?
Yeah, what's the deal? We'll talk about that after, maybe, Tyler. Yeah, see if I'm interested.
Ovechkin for Troy Terry.
Yeah,
one for one.
One for one. Yeah.
The trade's 1 for 1.
Oh boy, the trade is 1 for 1. God, I have nightmares over that still.
PTSD, I think.
You guys are talking Taylor Hall here.
Taylor Hall, yeah.
Yeah. Don't even. No, I don't even want to talk about it.
We're just gonna get right off the rails if we start talking about that. Let's not do that.
Moving along.
The next thing I want to talk about was individual scoring chances for and individual high danger scoring chances for. Mike, I don't know if that's anything that you typically use when evaluating players. It's something I started looking at this year, and I don't know. What are your thoughts, first of all?
Yeah, so I don't use those, but I don't want to sway other people from using them by any means. My only kind of philosophical issue with those stats is that, and this will tie into some goalie stats as well, is that they are heavily dependent on accurate position measurements from the NHL data.
That's fair. Yep.
And there's some wonkiness to that data, as we've seen. Occasionally we see people who plot the shot data for a game, and you'll see a shot that came from like the second row. Like it's not on the ice. It doesn't map on the ice or something. There's some weird things happen.
Sure.
And that will get better with time. Probably the more important thing to me is just, again, this is kind of a philosophical argument and not so much a fantasy hockey argument, is that everything's being based on position. And so if you're 12 feet out in front of the goalie and you shoot the puck, every 12-foot shot gets treated the same way within a certain range of angles.
Yeah.
And to me, just kind of fundamentally, that seems very wrong. I think the real important factor is time. A goalie's ability to react to a shot. And so if one shot is much faster than the other, it has to have a much higher rate of going in the net.
Right. Yep.
And so if you don't have the puck speed, associated with that distance, you're kind of comparing two shots that really, you're calling them the same, but they're actually quite different.
Yep.
And again, that's not a knock on these stats. These people who've come up with these ideas are smart people, and they're doing what they can with the data that is available.
Yeah.
We don't have time data, right? We don't have reaction times. Maybe we will. I see, they're doing that puck tracking and player tracking this year.
I was just going to say, yeah, they're moving towards that, right? Where they're going to have, they've got the trackers on the jerseys. They were,
right.
Are they still using the trackers and the pucks? Like, I know they were initially, and then players are kind of complaining about it. So,
I can't remember if they brought it back or not. I know they were removed for some amount of time.
Yeah. But so I guess
I think last season
they are moving in that direction, and that's encouraging. I guess for me, when I'm looking at it from a fantasy perspective, it's just purely relative, right? Okay, if this guy is creating X number of high danger chances and this guy's creating Y, right? Kind of who over time, like who has been creating more chances, and that's kind of how I utilize that information.
Oh yeah, I think that's a great way to do it.
And just knowing that it's not a perfect system by any means, but just when you're kind of evaluating two players, if it's for a waiver wire pick or trade or whatever the case may be, that's kind of how I'm utilizing that information. And so, I mean, some of our listeners or people that follow us on social media, they'll find I'm just including some of those stats in tweets when we do our kind of fantasy hockey thoughts stuff, just for reference.
Yeah, I think it would be neat, and this is something that I have neglected to do, is to look at how these things carry over from season to season. So, if we have some of these guys who are producing high danger shots against, are they able to repeat that? Is that something, a repeatable skill?
Yeah, that'd be interesting to know. Okay. The last one here we have for skaters is even strength and power play production. I guess looking at what percentage of a player's total points are collected at even strength. I mean, how important is that when you're talking in terms of fantasy, Mike?
I would say it's pretty strong, especially if you run into a situation where you have drafted a player because you thought he was going to be on the top power play unit, and then he doesn't get that job for some reason.
Yeah.
You want that even strength production to fall back on. A pretty good example of that, I think, is Alex Pietrangelo in Vegas. So, he was the number one guy in St. Louis, right, for several years on their power play.
Mm-hmm.
And I was under the assumption that when Vegas brought him in, that they were going to put him on that top unit. And he has seen some time up there by himself and as a mixed partner with Theodore. But it's not his job, right? Like it's pretty much Theodore's job in Vegas. And So for me, that's kind of a prime example of where you want to make sure that the guy you're drafting has kind of a baseline of even strength points, just in case something weird happens on the power play.
Well, and there's a lot of volatility, right? Just in terms of how the power play produces year to year. And the other thing too is in your draft kits, Mike, you had mentioned there's data to show that penalty minutes per game or penalties in general are on the downswing, correct?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So if you're relying on power play production for your fantasy players, you're seeing less of it, correct?
That's right. And even within a single season, the trend has always been for several years, because I track this. It's not something I've published at the website, and I should, but the trend has always been that there are more power play opportunities in the early months, like October and November.
Yeah.
And it's a consistent drop through April.
Just through the eye test. Not just as a fan of the game watching it, it's pretty apparent. It seems to be.
That's right. Yeah.
I was texting the group the other night when the Oilers were playing, right? And it honestly was like prison rules against Seattle. Like we're into December now, right? It's a couple months into the season, and I guarantee you some of those hits we saw against Seattle the other night would have been called in October, early October, and they were not called the other night. And
yeah, and this is about the time. So like the way I like to measure it is I find the average number of power play opportunities per season, and that's kind of my baseline. By sometime in December each year, the power play opportunity rate is at that baseline from the previous season.
okay,
So it starts out, very high.
yeah,
And then by December, it has reached the average. And what that means is for the rest of the season, it's going to be below what it was last year. So it's weird.
interesting. Okay, that's good stuff. Well, guys, that's some of the skater metrics to look at in terms of the analytics segment of the framework that we're looking at here. Let's move on to goalies and just kind of staying on point, even strength save percentage. So what kind of should we be paying attention there, Mike, in terms of even strength save percentage when evaluating goaltenders?
Yeah, and so I'll say from the get-go here that goalies are just a bit more difficult to evaluate than the skaters, as I'm sure you guys have seen in your own fantasy hockey leagues.
Mm-hmm.
With that said, there are a few things you can do and say about them. And one of the things I like to do, at least with even strength save percentage, is I try to look for guys who are posting even strength save percentages above 0.935. And the reason I do this is because you're really only going to see about one of those guys every season. So by the time the season's over, there's really only going to be one man standing at or above 935. And that's pretty consistent over the last 20 years. Right now, there are 9 of those goalies in the league. I weeded out, some of the guys with lower games played. So my data may not match what you see on NHL.com or something. But of guys, I think, who have started at least 10 games, there are 9 goalies who have what I would call an abnormal even strength save percentage.
Is Koskinen one of them?
Wait, you said Koskinen?
Koskinen, yeah.
Yeah.
No, he's not on.
Oh man.
I almost looked down at my sheet, but I was like, no, I'm
Yeah,
not
I
looking at these.
I seen that and I felt bad right away. Don't look at the sheet. Don't look at the sheet. We know the answer.
Yeah, you caught me. My eyes started to go down, but I didn't look.
Sorry. Okay, good.
Man, Tyler.
Good one, Tyler. That was quite funny.
Yeah, so yeah, a few of these guys, I'm sure plenty of people own in leagues too. It's guys like Edinger out of Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
It's Demko in Vancouver, Hellebuck in Winnipeg. Just to name a few of those guys right now who are kind of performing at a level that's just a little bit too high at even strength, that is.
Bruce and I were just the other night talking about Hellebuck. There was a trade request, posed to us through Ask the Hacks. So we were talking about Hellebuck, and yeah, his even strength save percentage is at 936 right now, but his PK save percentage, which we'll talk about in a second here, Mike, is actually low. It's at 810 right now.
Oh yeah, it's outrageously low.
Yeah.
So I think the combined factor of those two things probably means he has more room to grow.
Yeah.
Like I think he could be better this season.
Absolutely. And that was what we had talked about. And actually his even strike save percentage. So I guess, like what's the NHL average in terms of even strike save percentage? I'm not sure if you mentioned that.
No, I didn't. And I think it's around 921. Does that sound about right?
And I'm asking because Hellebuck's right in that range. He's at 920 last year, 929 the year before, and 920 the year before that. So he's been very consistent right at, 920, 925. So yeah, interesting. He's like, I like Hellebuck moving forward. I think just not on the even strike save percentage so much right now, but in terms of everything. Okay. Any other points on even strike save percentage we should talk about?
Yeah, that's really all I've got on that. I don't really look too much at the low end of things because there's almost no floor sometimes, right? Some of these guys can have really bad seasons.
Well, now you're talking about Koskinen?
Now I'm talking about Koskinen. That's right.
Now he's talking about him.
Yeah,
now
exactly.
I got it.
Okay, well let's move on then to penalty kill save percentage.
Okay, so yeah, this is the nice thing about goalies, I think, is that this is the one thing with goalies that you can really attribute to luck. And I'll be careful with my wording here, actually. Sometimes teams just have really terrible penalty kills or really good penalty kills. And that can help their goalie, of course. But my premise is if you're not getting a boost from luck or a negative boost from luck, and your team just really is very bad at the penalty kill, your team is going to do something to change that. Whether it's fire the coach or change the personnel or make a trade, like something's going to happen because they're watching this too. They know their penalty kill sucks.
Yeah.
And so when I use the term luck, most of the time I really do mean luck, but sometimes I'm making it a little bit more broad and including these teams that are kind of bad at something, but for whom I expect a change, they'll make a change to not be so bad in the future. So with that said, with penalty kill save percentage, the league average value is around 0.865.
Yep.
And so you want to look for values either very, very high or very, very low away from that number, 0.865. And so a reasonable number on the high end is 0.905. I just use that kind of as my high cutoff. If I'm looking for goalies that have values greater than 905. Again, this is something you're going to find guys who finish the season above 905, maybe one or two goalies per season at the most.
Okay.
And right now there are 7 of these goalies.
Okay.
So I would look at those 7 goalies and I'd be a little bit concerned. I'd say, hey, their save percentage numbers are being, buoyed by some good luck. And it's not likely to last for an entire season.
So if you're a listener and you're looking at that and going, oh man, that's kind of high. If you're going to go and try and sell high, like are you kind of assessing the team's penalty kill? Like, are you looking at that and going, hey, you know what? They actually have a great penalty kill and historically they've had a great penalty kill. Maybe I shouldn't panic, or like, how do you weigh that situation?
Yeah, it's tough because every time I try to convince myself that a team is good at something, especially like the penalty kill.
Yeah.
When I dig down into the individual goalies, the numbers don't support it.
Right.
And so, for instance, I looked at the highest penalty kill save percentage ever in the NHL is Semyon Varlamov. He posted a .942 on the penalty kill.
Oh, wow.
In 2014, 2015.
Crazy.
And that's just unbelievable. If that were his even strength save percentage, it would be a red flag to me. But that was just his penalty kill.
Wow.
And so just to make myself feel better, I said, okay, let me just check to see what did Varlamov do the very next season. So after posting a .942, he posted a .859.
Pretty much expected.
Yeah, so he,
Wow.
huge drop way back down to the league mean.
Which is a
And so
fantasy
it's just
manager.
these,
Sorry to cut you off. That sucks, right? Like as a fantasy manager, that everybody does it all the time, right? It's, oh, this guy was phenomenal last year, and then you see a 10% drop like that the next season. It's that's why people say goalies are voodoo.
yeah, and that's why for me, when I'm projecting goalies each season, like in the off season, I never let them have a penalty kill save percentage that's anything very different from the league average.
Okay.
The only reason I even look at their previous season penalty kill save percentage is to see if they were lucky or not.
Okay. All right. Good stuff.
And so, we've got a few guys on that list. If anybody's interested in those names,
Yeah.
it's Gibson, John Gibson out of Anaheim. It's Shesterkin for the Rangers. Reimer is up there pretty high for San Jose. And then Tristan Jarry for Pittsburgh is getting a little lucky on the penalty kill this year.
So I guess I'll throw this out to you quick, Mike. That trade request we were talking about on Sunday night, Bruce and I, the offer was, would you trade Tristan Jarry for Mitch Marner? And the initial offer was 1-for-1. And Bruce and I both agreed, no, I wouldn't do that. Like I'm in agreement on that. I would keep Jarry. But then I presented that to the listener, and then he came back and he said, this guy just offered me Marner and Hellebuck for Jarry. And
Do it.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that was pretty much
that's amazing.
That was pretty much what we said.
Yeah. They like, just do it now and run. And so I felt good because we kind of told him to hold out, and he ended up with a much better trade offer. So I don't know.
That's an incredible return.
Yeah.
I hope nobody votes on that.
Exactly.
Yeah. That might be veto worthy, but yeah. Anyway.
And the league manager isn't me.
Unless you're making the trade.
Yeah, unless I'm making it, then that's totally getting pushed through.
Yeah.
We're not even voting on it. I'm just approving it.
Hey guys, there was this trade last week that happened. I just want to let you know.
Yeah. I don't know what happened, but it's gone through and everything's great.
It got processed. Yeah. It's great. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. Last one here for goaltenders is goals saved above average. Is that one that you look at? Like I know Natural Stat Trick, that's one they have on their website, and I've seen it a couple other places. But do you put much stock in that metric?
Yeah, so I kind of look at that the same way I looked at some of those high danger scoring chances for the forwards.
Yep.
I think these are neat ideas. I think they're doing the best they can with the data that's available. But I think they kind of suffer from the same flaw.
Yeah.
And that's that they're using distance as one of the main variables, as opposed to time, as opposed to reaction time.
Yeah.
I was reminded of this watching the Flyers recently. I saw a shot from the point, and shots from the point are very, very low danger, right? Almost under all circumstances, when you're doing the calculations, at least they're considered low danger.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting about those shots from the point is, if you have forwards in place who are, blocking the view of the goalie never moves, right? Like if it's done to perfection,
yeah,
the goalie doesn't even move because he doesn't see it. And that's about as high danger as you can ask for, right? Is that the goalie has no reaction whatsoever. And these are all kind of interesting things. And again, these are not things. I'm not even suggesting you could really measure these things. You'd have to hire a team to watch every play,
right,
and write down the numbers. And I'm sure there are probably private companies who do this and make money from it, a lot of money from it.
Sure.
But for people, like Natural Stat Trick, who are trying to run a nice site with great data on it, you just can't do that. You just have to treat every shot from the point as, it's kind of a garbage shot from a long distance. And
yeah. Well, we've heard NHL coaches talk about that lots. You're seeing less shots from the point for that reason, right? It's Dave Tippett basically calls it a turnover as opposed to a scoring chance, right, or a shot on goal, because that's kind of what it is almost, right?
Yeah, and it depends on so many things, right? Like, do you have an accurate guy from the blue line who can get it on net?
Yeah.
Do you have someone who's kind of a neat player who can stand in front and deflect that puck from the point?
Yeah.
You know, if you have Joe Pavelski on your team, maybe shots from the point are much more meaningful, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I think somebody just made John's list.
I think Pavelski is actually on his list.
He is definitely on my list.
I don't know how, John. That one doesn't. That one baffles me.
I'll back you up on that, John. I would put Joe Pavelski on my list.
Awesome.
Oh,
And here's why.
He was just crying a couple days ago. How could he be on anybody's list? This is bad timing.
We're going to make him cry tonight.
There you go.
Yeah, for me, the reason I would want Joe Pavelski on someone's list, John's list, is because so I've been making draft kits at Left Wing Lock, going back a long time. I don't know, 12 years now or something. And he is the one guy who will defy the odds no matter what. So, most players, if their shooting percentage is around 12.5%, maybe one year it'll be 10, maybe one year it'll be 14, but for the most part, they'll kind of bounce around in between 10 and 14. Joe Pavelski, if you look at his individual season shooting percentage over his career, 9% this year. Next year, 22%. Oh, you got 22%. You think it's going to come back down? Oh, he's going to do 19. Then he's going to do 10. Then he's going to do 24. He's an animal, and you cannot project what he's going to do from season to season. And I remember one year, I saw his shooting percentage. It was so high, and I was like, all right, I'm going to project him lower next season. There's no doubt he has to drop. Sure enough, he dropped, and we almost nailed his shooting percentage to the decimal. So what did Joe Pavelski do through his tears? He jacks up his shooting volume by like 40 shots. And so he ends up with the same number of goals as the previous season. Now, I wanted to like tear up our draft kit. I was like so mad.
You guys have much different lists. Yours is much more analytical. John's is like, I don't like he's missing 2 teeth. Fuck him. I hate him.
That's basically how it rolls around here.
Yeah, that's great.
That's all right.
Good stuff.
He's a hometown boy, so I have to hate him.
Oh, good.
There you go.
Well, not hometown, but close enough.
Close enough. Okay, where was I? I think we're done now with goaltenders. Let's move on to teams. And Mike, again, this is one thing I found at Left Wing Lock was the possession and luck charts. You guys call them pluck charts. Maybe you can tell our listeners about that and why they're important.
Yeah, so for the possession and luck chart, here's how I can best describe that. It is a chart that simultaneously looks at how a team performs from a puck possession standpoint and whether or not the team is getting lucky. And we try to combine those two factors into one chart in an effort to kind of show you which teams are on the right track for the playoffs. And so we'll probably include a chart in the show notes here so people can see what we're referring to. But essentially, anybody to the right-hand side of this chart is a team that has strong puck possession. They consistently outshoot their opponents. And that's a good start. That's the number one thing you want in hockey. Can you win if you don't outshoot your opponents? Yes, you can. But if you're asking me to take dollars out of my pocket and bet on teams that will make the playoffs, I will always bet on the teams that outshoot their opponents. Yeah. And so that's kind of the horizontal, the left-right aspect of the chart. The vertical location on the chart is reserved for the luck of the team. And this would be, is the team shooting at a rate that's higher than normal? Is the team making saves at a rate that's higher or lower than normal? And so kind of the juicy spot, the prime spot of the pluck chart is to live in the upper right quadrant of the chart. You want to be both strong in puck possession and a little bit lucky. And over time, if you track the teams that end up in the Stanley Cup final, and we've done this over like 15 years, if you track these teams, about 94% of the teams that have made it to the Stanley Cup final can be found in the upper right part of that chart. So for
Where's
me,
Edmonton?
it's kind of a neat team level look at how a team is performing during a season.
Yep.
Edmonton's not in there.
No,
I
so
was gonna say.
Mike, I've got
Forget
this
that.
chart pulled up, and this is current, right? I think it says it was updated today.
Oh yeah, that'll be updated through Monday night's games.
So yeah, Edmonton is not on that list. Anaheim is sort of
Calgary
looks like a
is, though.
bubble team right now, but Vancouver's in there. Interestingly enough.
Yeah, Vancouver's a really neat team. Even before Boudreau got there, I kind of thought they were in a good position. They just had a really terrible penalty kill numbers, and it was crushing their team. But 5-on-5, they still look pretty good.
And they have goaltending.
Must be nice.
LA's in there. That's another one that's interesting. I don't think a lot of people had them in the playoffs prior to this season. So there's some people.
They've made a huge jump, right?
Yeah. Florida's kind of where you'd expect them, right? Carolina, Washington, Tampa, Minnesota, Colorado, Vegas. Kind of the usual suspects, really.
Yeah, and so Tyler, I know you're into betting, right? From what I've heard on previous episodes, if you're looking to place one on a cup final, that's the spot of the graph I would be looking at right now.
I'm not putting any money on Calgary. I won't do it. I won't do it.
Yeah, I won't do it either. Although I think the odds were like it was pretty good betting.
I'm not
odds.
doing it.
I'm just saying, if you want to put a
I'm
little
not
sprinkle,
doing
Tyler,
it.
a little sprinkle.
I'm not sprinkling nothing on them.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that if you look way to the left-hand side of that chart, you'll see two teams that are actually in playoff spots right now: the Rangers and the Red Wings. Red Wings are a wild card; they're just barely holding on. But
Yeah.
and by this chart, it look pretty bad actually. Both of those teams, they're getting heavily outshot at even strength by their opponents. I mean, I think they're both in the bottom 4 or bottom 5 of the league in puck possession.
Well, and you had mentioned there was probably some regression coming for Shesterkin, based on his numbers, some of the even strength, and
Yeah, that's right.
so that's not surprising. But I mean, they've been another pleasant surprise, I think, for fans of that team this year. Like nobody expected them to be where they are right now.
Yeah, and I actually think I looked at the standings earlier. Their lead, or at least their position in the standing, is probably high enough that they might survive.
Interesting.
I'm not sure who could catch them. I think Boston will end up getting in the playoffs, but really that just means Detroit's going to drop out, right?
Yeah.
Who else could get in? I don't think Philadelphia's going to be able to make a run strong enough for them to catch the Rangers.
Okay, so
I mean,
being that you're speaking to 4 Oilers fans too here, Mike. I mean, what's our Oilers are sitting out of playoff contention right now according to this chart. So, but where do you see those guys moving forward?
Where are they right now in the standings? They're a wild card. Okay, so they're the
second wild card. Yeah,
second wild card team, and yeah, according to this pluck chart right now, they're not in great shape. They're what I would call a possession neutral team, and so for listeners, that basically just means they have possession stats of 50%. They neither outshoot their opponent nor are they consistently outshot, which kind of leaves things up in the air, right? If you're a 50% team when it comes to puck possession, you're basically at the mercy of luck. And right now, if you look at where their bubble is on the chart, it's pretty low, which means they're kind of unlucky so far.
I think with the previous 8 games in there too, that probably skews stuff because, I mean, they were playing at the start of that better than they should have been, and then they were losing games that they shouldn't have been losing near the end of that too. So it's a small sample size, I think, at this point in the season, but definitely lower than I would have hoped they'd be.
I'm just wondering if
Yeah,
they.
and that could be a great combination too. Is somebody who watches the team quite a bit,
Right.
to kind of understand those details from game to game, and then kind of try to match it up with one of these charts to see if these things make sense.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering if they can actually get some goaltending, if that's going to help them, right? If they're kind of like if they're treading water in terms of possession, if they get some better goaltending, like Koskinen, we joke about it, but it's a big problem, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and that's actually what this chart is saying too. Is since their bubble is blue.
Yeah.
So when the listeners look at this chart later, since Edmonton's bubble is blue, it means they're getting weaker goaltending at even strength than you would expect.
Yeah.
It's below the league average. And so if they had somebody in net who could stop shots at an average or higher rate, their bubble color would move toward the orange end of the spectrum, and that would cause their bubble to rise on the chart, which would put them closer to that playoff line.
Yeah.
Even if they stop the first shot, that'd be pretty neat.
Just every once
You should
in a
make a
while.
color for that. Yeah, make a color for that. Be purple.
Stopping of the first shot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good Lord.
Okay. That was good, guys. Let's move along here then onto production. That's kind of the next part of the framework here, and it's pretty straightforward. It's just reviewing the player's production to date in all relevant categories for your league. Mike, anyone that purchases a draft kit from Left Wing Lock, they've got the option to put in their league stats, right? And they can view production for their specific league.
Yeah, that's right. And so they'll get the projections at the beginning of the season, and then we do weekly updates to those projections.
So they can follow along throughout the season. I mean, I just, it's pretty straightforward in this category for me anyway. It's just a matter of looking at how one player compares to another in different categories. And so I'm just, is there do you guys have a player comparison tool on Left Wing Lock, Mike? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think if you look under skaters in the menu.
Yep.
And then there's something called Skater Compare, I believe.
That's right. Okay. So I'll put a link in the show notes then for that as well under the.
Yeah, you can punch in, I think, up to 12 or maybe more, 12 players.
Yeah, it's got 12 here.
And it'll break down a whole bunch of different stats, like the per 60 stats. It'll do the secondary assist. It'll do your normal goals, hits, and block shots, things like that. Okay. And you can just see all of that data on one page, comparing, up to 12 players at a time.
Okay. Anything else, guys? Tyler, John, Bruce, that you guys look at in terms of production statistics or I guess like you guys mentioned previously, production in the last 7, last 15, last 30 kind of thing.
Yeah, we might have to add a category for COVID per 60 at this point. The way the season's gone, but...
Or shifts.
Shifts per 60. I like the COVID one though, Tyler. Maybe we'll get a category for that one.
Throw that.
Yeah, actually, I mean that's funny too. But it's also, it may be an interesting way to look at things too. Is to look at which players have already been in the protocol.
Yeah.
Because presumably, until there's 14 new variants that come after us, presumably those players would be able to finish the season unscathed, right?
Yeah.
So if Petrangelo,
that could actually directly correlate to your team, even in waiver wire pickups where there's somebody who hasn't been out or in COVID protocol. How many more points did you get because you had that guy as opposed to having to use up a IR spot? And most leagues don't have 10 or 15 of them, even though you could use that many right now.
Yep.
That could actually make sense to do. Just sad to even talk about, but reality.
Yeah. Let's move on to strength of schedule. Again, the Left Wing Lock app has a nice schedule tool that kind of gives you strength of schedule. The lower the number, the easier the schedule. The higher the number, the more difficult the schedule. So I find that quite helpful, just looking through there and assessing which players I want to pick up or not for the coming week. But then I also take a look if it's a spot start for a goaltender, I'll look at splits, home and away, right? Because some goaltenders do play better at home versus the road or vice versa. And then matchups too. And actually the NHL app, you can just go in there and you can go into the game center portion of the games and you can review the season series. And so I mean, that to me is helpful too, because you can look and see, hey, how do the last 2 or 3 games in this series go? So those are kind of some of the things I look at. But Mike, for you, for strength of schedule and splits and matchups, what do you kind of look at?
Yeah, so for me, strength of schedule for me is really, I use it as a tiebreaker.
Okay.
If I'm close on 2 or 3 players that I'm looking to pick up for next week, I'll look at the strength of schedule and say, all right, these guys are playing Ottawa twice and Buffalo on Thursday. I want them, Yeah,
for sure. Speaking of Ottawa, strangely enough, did you guys see the tweet I put out earlier? Yeah? No?
I muted you a couple
Hey, that's fair. That is fair.
Yeah, you're not the only one.
I'm just going to pull this up. Since December 1st, the Senators have scored the 3rd most goals in the NHL. More than
I did see that one actually.
Yeah, more than Toronto, more than St. Louis, Minnesota, Pittsburgh, Carolina, and New York. And they've actually got the 6th most even strength goals in that time too.
What's been their strength of schedule since December 1st?
I don't know. Can you look at that, Mike, over a period of time, or is it just week by week?
I don't have that capability at the site. No, unfortunately.
So yeah, you'd have to look week by week, Tyler. You could probably just go and see what their strength of schedule was. And that's a good point. I don't know who they played from December 1st on. I could go back at their game logs and take a look, but
could have been shooting against Koskinen for 5 of those games.
Very likely could have been the case.
Or bump your number. Get those numbers up.
I should try to build that into the roster maximizer now that you guys brought that up. That's a neat idea.
We're here to help, Mike.
Yeah, that's
the only thing I'm here for.
Just looking at their schedule from the last, 4 or 5 games. They played the Lightning twice. They played the Panthers.
Never mind.
Oh, wow.
Flyers here. They lost to the Flyers in overtime the other day. So, but
nice.
Pulled out a win against Colorado, Jersey, and Carolina too. So,
and the wins though against Tampa, Carolina, that was Rantanen and Elliott. Yep. Those weren't their starting goaltenders. Those were their backups. The games they won.
Yep.
And that's probably pretty typical, I think, hey, for a team like it happens all the time, right? A team like Tampa's going to play their backup, especially if it's on a back-to-back or something.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, Mike, thanks, guys. That was great. So that's basically our framework for evaluating players. So L.A.P.S, L.A.P.S. Take a look. We've got everything in the show notes. You guys can review all the information we talked about here. And with that, we're going to move on to DraftKings. As a member of the hockey... Sorry, go ahead, John.
I just wanted to say one thing.
No, it's fine. I'll halt the ad read here. Continue.
Well, I didn't want to just yell at the guy.
No, go for it.
No, just during the episode, just looking through the Left Wing Locks site just makes me realize on how poor my goalie choices were and on how many better decisions I could have made.
I could have told you that.
What?
Has Tyler got a trade for you?
It's
after the show. After the show.
Yeah, right. Okay. No, there's just so much good information on the site, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm bummed I don't have like an iPhone.
Say it. Yep.
Well, I gotta rephrase that. I'm bummed that there's no app for the Android users, but the website works perfectly fine, and yeah, it's just a wonderful tool to have.
I agree. Mike, you've done a phenomenal job. There's a lot of great tools on this site.
Yeah, thank you.
Should probably use it before the season.
Not gonna lie, I cried a little when I looked at Fleury's numbers and Merzlikins' numbers, and
oh yeah.
Yeah, things are looking pretty grim in Chicago. Huh?
Yeah.
Although Fleury's been pretty good recently, right? I think for about a week or so.
Yes. I'll take it.
I'm on the list for next week again, I'm pretty sure, so that's good.
You should be on the list every week.
You should. You'll never run out of material, I can promise you that.
Lots of good stuff from Tyler. Yeah. Okay. Well, with that, guys, thanks. I'm going to move on to the ad read then here for DraftKings, if you don't mind. As a member,
Are you sure? Are you sure?
yeah, if that's okay with you, John.
I just wanted to interrupt again for no reason.
Okay. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I'm going to take a big suck of wind here. As a member of the Hockey Podcast Network, the Fantasy Hockey Hacks podcast is a proud partner of DraftKings. The NHL season is well underway, and DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, has an unbelievable offer to celebrate the greatest sport on ice. New customers can bet just $1 on any NHL game and win $100 in free bets if either team scores a goal. Doesn't matter if it's a clapper from the point, a deft deflection, or a highlight reel goal from McDavid. However they light the lamp, you win. If DraftKings Sportsbook is not available in your state or location yet, DraftKings won't leave you empty-handed. Everyone can play for huge cash prizes all season long with DraftKings Daily Fantasy Sports Contests. DraftKings is giving all new customers a free shot at millions of dollars in total prizes with their first deposit. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code THPN. Bet $1 on any team to score and win $100 in free bets. If they score, you score with promo code THPN this week at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL and the NFL. Must be 21 years of age or older in New Jersey, Indianapolis, Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Minimum $5 deposit and $1 wager required. One customer restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
You should start it. You should start an intermission next time before you got to read that out.
I'll let you know. I'll let you know ahead of time next time we read that one.
Refill the glass. Yeah, okay, sounds good.
Okay, so then with that, let's move on to our next segment here, and that's the introduction to Mike's new segment. So, Mike, once a week we're going to have you on as a regular guest. We're going to go through this new segment. We'll go through our regular format as well. We'll get into the hockey news, which I explained to these guys earlier. Tyler, I don't think I did tell you, but we're changing the name of our news and notes segment to Headlines with the Hacks. So that's what we're calling that one.
All right.
Nice.
We'll run through the rest of our format like we normally do, and then Mike's going to include this new segment as well. And we're really excited about it. It should be a lot of fun. So, Mike, with that, I'm just going to let you introduce the segment. It's your baby, so have at her.
Yeah, so this will be brief here. It's just going to be a segment called Fact or Fiction. And so each time we run this segment, we'll choose 3 interesting cases or case studies from the NHL. And those studies could either be a team, they could focus on a particular forward, a particular defenseman, or a particular goalie. And we'll look at that case. We'll present some of the interesting stats for that case. And then we'll make kind of arrive at a verdict as to whether or not this case is a fact or a fiction. And, for just kind of as a little teaser, for instance, we were talking earlier about the Detroit Red Wings using the possession and luck chart and talking about how right now they look like they're a playoff team because, they sit in the wild card slot. So we would do a little rundown of their stats and how they look to see if their results are matching their process. And if the results match the process, then we're going to come back with the verdict of fact. And if the results don't match the process, then we're going to declare that to be fiction. And so there should be some interesting cases that we pick up from time to time. Yeah,
I'm really excited about this segment. You had actually sent over sort of a sample segment just to what that would look like, and you included some examples of the Red Wings. I think you had Matt Duchene was one example you had in there. So that should be really interesting. Mike, are we going to throw that out to listeners at all? Like, I mean, if they have some fact or fiction questions, are you open to maybe just assessing some requests or some questions?
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, so just keeping that in mind then for our listeners, if you do want to submit some of your own cases that you're curious about, send us an email, fantasyhockeyhacks@gmail.com. I'll make sure that information gets along to Mike, and we're going to do that once a month. So at any point throughout the month, feel free to send us those questions, those cases, and we'll take a look at them. And then I guess the other thing too, quick, Mike, Left Wing Lock is offering for our Ask the Hack segment. If for everyone that does submit a question on a weekly basis, we're going to put them into a pool for a draw. And they're going to win a subscription for a year. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So thank you, by the way. That's very generous. That's a great prize for our listeners. If you guys are interested, again, that email, fantasyhockeyhacks@gmail.com, or just submit your questions through social media on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Facebook. And with that, guys, I don't have anything else for the show this week. So hopefully next week, and when this drops on the 27th, we're actually back into some regularly scheduled hockey games, and we can get back into our regular format.
Yeah, I hope you guys didn't make any vacation plans for the Olympic schedule.
No.
It sounds like they're going to turn those weeks into regular season weeks now, right?
Unfortunately. I think we're all disappointed here. Like, this is the one opportunity we're going to have to see Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, and Sidney Crosby all play together, potentially on the power play, right? And now,
oh gosh,
yeah, could you imagine?
Wow.
Jeez.
throw Brad Marchand into that mix, and that's a pretty deadly power play. So, I think my hope, and someone, I can't remember it might have been Elliot Friedman or Jeff Merrick on the 32 Thoughts podcast. They said the hope now, the players, the best they can hope for is that gets pushed back to next year, similar to what happened with the Summer Olympics.
Oh, interesting.
Hopefully it's not in China too, because that makes a huge difference.
Well, just with the protocols, like, I mean, Tyler, are you going to sit in China for 5 weeks?
I'm not going to sit there for 2 days.
When that news came out that you could potentially be stuck in China for 5 weeks,
They're probably going to
there's
put
no
them
way,
in.
man. There's no way I would let a country imprison me for 5 weeks.
They're probably going to put them in work camps for 5 weeks.
Teach our guys how to play hockey for 5 weeks.
Be like doing bag skates for 5 weeks.
Yeah, brutal.
I am interested now that you guys mentioned China a couple of times. I know there had been some concern about how terrible their hockey team was going to be.
Yep.
Maybe this helps them out a little bit, right? I guess if they're not playing against 4 Connor McDavids,
They might push it a year and say, hey, that's okay. We'll wait. I don't know. I mean, China's not going to be thrilled that the NHL's not going, because that's a big draw for that event, right? And so now, like, who's going to be there? They have the guys from the Spengler Cup basically playing. So, yeah. No disrespect to them, but
does anybody know what time it is in China?
that's a good question. I have to Google that one.
Just off the offhand, you guys know the time zones of China off the back of your head.
It's 12:26 p.m. there, Mike.
Oh, lunchtime.
It's lunchtime.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, I was just curious what the TV viewing situation would be like for the Olympics.
So we should be watching a primetime game at about 3 a.m. our time.
Something like
that's
that,
good.
yeah.
Huh.
Not ideal.
Perfect.
I'd be recording those ones.
I'd be up for it, but I mean, if I don't have to be, I guess that's good.
Exactly.
Wow.
One other thing we should talk about too here. Did you guys see the news that the Calgary Flames have backed out of
50.
the arena deal?
Yes.
Yeah, I seen that come down there.
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
At $9.7
Yeah, it just
million
came
fee.
right before the show started.
Yeah. I just put a tweet out, and then I was going to put a post on Instagram as well. But it's basically, Bruce, the cost, they're backing out over like an estimated 1.5% of the total project cost.
It's just a tactic.
Yep.
They did that in Edmonton too. It's annoying to have to actually, like, I don't care if Calgary gets one. I'm happy with them having the Saddle Dome because it sucks. They suck too. But it's just a tactic. It's political crap.
Yeah.
And Edmonton did it for years, and it was happening the whole time. It makes too much sense not to do it. So
Yeah, they're
it's just annoying that.
they're not going to do it. It's going to happen in Calgary
Yeah.
eventually, but yeah. Okay, I just thought I should mention it. Any other news or notes you guys want to talk about before we sign off? Nope. Okay, well, like I said, this episode is going to drop Monday, December 27th, just after the Christmas season. So, guys, thanks for jumping on. Keep an eye out for that. I'll have the show notes in the blog post as well. Mike, thanks again for joining us for the special pre-recorded episode. It was good timing since there was no hockey on this week.
Yeah, no, it worked out perfectly. Thanks again for having me on, guys.
Absolutely. Okay, well, guys, we'll see you in the next one. Take care. Merry Christmas.
Good night.
Good night.
Happy holidays.
You would be that guy.